All right. So we already touched upon one icebreaker question, but now we have a lot of new people joining in. So I wanted to ask a non-technical question to you all. So what is your favorite non-technical hobby? What have you been, trying to do or are enjoying lately, which is not technical at all? And I'll be honest, it's more of my own personal gains. I'm trying to get into new hobbies and I want to get some ideas. Ooh, these are some nice ones. Wow. I like all these ideas. Huh. How many I can do in a month or in an year? I don't know. But I really love those ideas, folks. Keep them coming in. I would like to know what are your favorite non-technical hobbies? Well, you all are sharing your favorite hobbies. I'm gonna just move forward and just gonna quickly give you a glance of the agenda over here. So as usual, we have product updates by none other than Max. We will then dive into a really interesting use case by Thomas, which is handling GDPR with automation. After that, you'll have an opportunity to ask your questions. So feel free to ask any questions that you have in the chat, and I'll make sure that I ask your questions to the speakers. We then have Adrian from OpsMate, who will be talking about building an automation for startup and sharing his journey with us. And lastly, we have Jason, who is going to teach us how to create workflows which can be easily configured by end users. And then, if time permits, we'll have our favorite ice-breaking sessions about which I'm going to talk a bit later on. So without wasting much of your time, let's give it over to Max to show what we are working at N10. Over to you, Max.
As always, Harshal, thank you so much for the lovely introduction. I'll just get my screen shared here. Can we quick check? Can we see the screen?
Yep.
Perfect. All right. Lovely to see everyone here. Some familiar faces and some new ones. I must say this update we have this week, I'm very, very excited for. There's a lot. I've even got a timer and written notes because there's a lot to get through. So I hope you're all very excited to see what we've been working on. The team's growing, so we're doing more, and it's just an exciting time to be working on it. So the first thing that I'm going to update, it starts with user and it ends with management. It's something that a lot of you have been asking me personally and a lot of our team members for quite a while. And I'm happy to say that we're almost there. And on that note, here's the first sneak peek of what it's going to look like. So this is a screenshot of the user's view. Of course, you can add new users and etc. So I wanted to give this little sneak peek because I don't have a working demo for you right now. But having said that, the functionality for the MVP, this version 1, is complete. So that's good news. And we are actively testing it. Of course, it's a very big feature, as we sort of said a few times, and it touches every single part of N8N. So the current state is we're sort of marrying the front end and the back end, and then we're going to do a bunch more testing before we release it all out to you. So I just want to manage those expectations that it's almost there. We're working on it. I would say it's almost our entire senior engineering team is on the case. We just want to make sure that we're releasing really high quality V1 for all you, given all the anticipation. On that note, I do want to set some expectations of what you can expect from the first version. So you will be able to have multiple users coexisting on an instance. They'll be able to have their own credentials and their own executions. And so this is kind of one of the biggest, I think, pain points right now as an organization or a team says, hey, look, we love N8N. But everyone's just in one instance right now sharing creds. It's not really good for scaling. And most people don't want to maybe handle 50 different Docker instances, right? Totally hear you there. So that's going to be the primary thing that we're trying to achieve with this version. And so you can rest assured that, you know, a bunch of people can be on one instance, and have their credentials, most importantly, secured. There will be an owner user that can view all workflows and credentials, sort of a pseudo user, if you would. But what it won't have is sharing of workflows. We just want to set this expectation, be clear about this, and I want to provide a bit of context as to why. A lot of what you're going to see, as you can see here, there's going to be some sort of beautiful new UI, etc. But most of the work is, you know, there's so much in the back end that we'd have to touch really to realize this feature and to set up all the other things that we'd like to achieve in this feature. So what you'll be seeing will, you know, a lot of what you're seeing, you won't see what we've done under the hood to set up all these things that we'd like to have in the near future. So once this is released, the types of features that we've already designed, planned, researched, and have, you know, committed to sort of building as part of this feature, you know, will be things like sharing, role types, all those sorts of things that you expect. But just want to manage the expectations that in this first version, we won't have those, because we wanted to not delay getting this out, but that the groundwork has been set so that it won't be sort of a mammoth task to be adding these other things that you might expect in a mature user management. So yeah, that should be coming out really soon. I don't want to put a date on it because, again, the QA process, I want to respect that. But yeah, be checking Twitter, etc. We'll probably be dropping a little hints when it's right out the door. So obviously everyone here at N8N has been very excited to release this one. So that's like the big mammoth feature, of course, that a lot of you have been pinging us on. But because the team's growing, working on a lot of other cool stuff that's also going through the design and engineering process right now. The next one is a refactor of the node details view. So here's a little sneak peek of it right here. And so the node details view, if you're not familiar, this is our term for when you have a node expanded, sort of the modal where you're setting up the step. With this refactor, as you can see, it's gotten a sort of a UX overhaul, a visual lift, but of course, we don't just do sort of visual updates for visual sake. Really, the goals of this feature were to reduce the need to context switch when building workflows. So one thing you probably notice if you're building a non-trivial flow is you got to close this mode all the time, go to the workflow, go to a different node, copy something, come back. So one of the biggest things we're adding here, as you can see, is this input pane. And by default, it will show the immediate input. That is the first connection coming right in, routing in data. But you will be able to toggle this drop down and select any sort of node previous in the workflow instead of this immediate input. So how we envision this is it's going to be a lot easier to reference it. So when you're setting up this step, you can reference, again, most of the time the data that's most relevant is the one being immediately sent into it, but you can toggle between that. And sort of looking ahead a little bit, you know, one thing we do envision generally in the node details view in future is to refactor how people handle expressions to also reduce context switching. And some early concepts of that showing sort of some hopeful signs of potentially having drag and drop from the inputs pane onto these expressions. So that's a bit of a ways off, this drag and drop feature, but sort of giving you an idea, the why behind how we're sort of building everything. We try to ship features lean and iterative, but do a lot of sort of thinking on the long-term future of it so we can sort of add with everything that we're sort of building. So just looking at my notes here, I want to have a big shout out to everyone that helped us test this. We did spike a proof of concept of this. And of course, the N8N community, when asked, jumped in, helped us out. So really, thanks for that. I think we got a lot of validation that what we're going to build here is going to be sort of helpful and a big improvement. And what you're seeing here is just a sneak peek of this feature. There's a lot more under the hood, a lot of issues and maybe frustrations and annoyances that we've been researching and coming up with a solution for. This is a regular node. Trigger nodes have sort of a similar big revamp. And I guess the last thing I'd say on this feature is that this middle pane will be adjustable. So the input and output pane will grow depending on which context is more important. So if you're looking at this view and saying, oh no, what am I going to do in table view? Don't worry, we thought of that and you will be able to adjust it. So this one, I would say the design of this is finished. And since the front end for user management is practically finished, this will probably be the next big feature that some of our front engineers are starting on. We've already started the work plan for this. So it's very much earmarked and we're about to break ground on code. The pixels are all done. The next feature then, so yeah, just quickly, yeah, the design for the node details view is done, breaking ground on implementation soon. The next feature that's also been designed and we plan to break ground on likely after node details view, perhaps in parallel, given the team's growing, is workflow notes. So, we do have notes within nodes, but of course, having the ability to annotate your workflows helps yourself when you come back to it 3 months later and you forgot what the hell's happening because it's been running fine and then something external broke. But also we see, this folks who submit workflows publicly to n@n.io/workflows. If you do have any interesting workflows, please do go ahead and submit them. But this offers sort of another mechanism for you to annotate your flows and basically share them, and also within your organization or publicly. So we're very excited about this one because I think it's going to empower the community to do a lot in terms of coming up with great use cases and sharing them with other people. Looking at this, in the V1, we will be supporting Markdown. So with that, you will get things like links, titles, lists that all should be available out of the box. Here you're seeing an example of like a concept of maybe how a note might look if it is kind of an onboarding note. And they will be resizable. So when we were doing some research between auto resizing and not, we decided to opt for manual resizing because out of the box, given we have Markdown and titles, you can do something like you see in B here, which is grouping sort of nodes, essentially, at least optically. So that should be helpful if you have different parts of a workflow that you want to annotate, especially in the sort of case, sometimes maybe you've done a bunch of black box magic in a function node or a series of nodes, and you're sort of telling your other users, don't touch this, touch these nodes here to configure the workflow. So that'll be something that you can more easily communicate, and also for yourself. Another thing we did is sort of when testing all this is zooming in and out. We've optimized the different headings here so that kind of works across different sizes. Post MVP, the first version, we have a lot conceptually that we'd like to ship. Of course, we wanted to ship the most valuable thing first. But once this initial version is released and everything you're seeing here should be possible in this initial version, we do plan to do things like adding color themes. So as you can imagine, a red one could be useful if you're sort of indicating what happens in an error. There's my timer there, so I'll finish up quickly. And for example, in this mockup, perhaps this is what a community workflow might look like. So you have sort of a clear, call to action on how to get started. Don't touch this part, right? It's all set up, but maybe you do need to set up this part or that part. Some of the other things that we're looking at, for example, is if the link resolves to a workflow JSON, that when you click it, it swaps the note out for that workflow and pastes it into the flow, which would allow us to do things like if you're setting up a node, a workflow, and the last node is a CRM, it could be a note with a link to 5 different CRMs, and you click that and it just swaps that out for that part of the workflow that works with that CRM. So these are all concepts. There is in the community forum, there's sort of a notes feature planned or posted there. So obviously we post there when it's out. But if you have any ideas beyond what we expect to make for MVP or anything that I just referenced here, get chatty with us. We love to hear about that. Any feature we build, we have a roadmap for it. So we commit to an initial version, right? We release that. And then we're always expecting to keep building on that feature. So even if your idea is complicated and won't make it in the next version, we write everything down. We love Notion. So please do get your ideas in because we want to make this as awesome as possible. And we want to make workflows as legible as possible because our mission is to give everyone with computer superpowers, right? So to do that, you need to understand what you're doing. So there's a lot of other stuff in progress. I will say we have started speccing out our public API. I won't say more on that now, but as you can imagine, there's a lot of exciting use cases that will be supported by that. And yeah, as always, thanks to everyone in the internet team for helping realize these features, and to our community. I think I send out a link for user testing like 30 seconds later, all the slots are booked. So you guys are all amazing, and thank you so much. Over to you, Harshal. Hopefully your sound fixes soon, Harshal. I don't have too many ad hoc riffs available.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Max. I can see all the love that is coming in from the community right now, and everyone is excited for these features, and I cannot myself wait to try out these features. Thank you so much again for sharing this. Now, moving forward, we got Tom with us, who is going to talk about a pain point that he came across and how he solved that. And he's also going to help us learn a bit more about GDPR. So, Tom, over to you.
Thanks so much, Harshil. Okay, folks, the boring part starts now. We talk about laws and regulations. Let me share my screen, and we'll dive right in. It's not that many slides, and actually I'm not a lawyer, so it will be fairly short, don't worry. Just in case you're not familiar with GDPR, like it's a term that has been in the news for quite a while. This is like a European Union regulation. GDPR stands for General Data Protection Regulation. But if you're not living in an English-speaking country, you might know it under slightly different terms. Like I've listed a few here, and there are many more, but I don't speak many more languages. So there you go. The GDPR mostly grants certain rights to individuals. So we as a company, NatN, do have no benefits from NatN, but lots of things we need to keep in mind. And that will be the same as soon as you process any personal data. But you as a user can benefit from GDPR. You can ask companies to do something, and they have no choice but to comply with your request. And we'll go into what this would be in a second. It has also been mocked by a lot of people, but has been quite a success, actually. There are a few international regulations that mimic most of the GDPR features. If you live in California, you might have come across the CCPA. Virginia is currently, I think, on the road to releasing their CDPA, and they all cover kind of similar things. So even if you don't have GDPR yet in your country, this might become relevant eventually for you. Now, what would we care about this? And this is now my very personal perspective on this. Individuals have the right to request the erasure of the personal data from companies, organizations, government agencies, and so on. This is also known as the right to be forgotten. So if you don't like us storing your data, you can come to us and say, hey, please delete my personal information. We then have a deadline of 1 month in total. And that is because we're data controller, right? So you give us your personal data and we control it. We might give it on to subcontractors to further process it, but we still have the obligation to make sure it gets deleted within a month. There are some extensions possible, but I'm not a lawyer, and the gist that I learned after reading through this is you have 1 month and don't even try to get these extensions. So that's the deadline we have. Non-compliance can be very expensive. So I've listed the fines there. It's up to 20 million or 4% in annual revenue of the company, whatever is more. So it can be quite expensive, though I have not heard of the highest fines being issued in the past. And one thing that I've noticed over the last month was that it's a business. It has become a business. There are service providers out there that help you enforce these rights. So one of the service providers would scan your email inbox for any suspicious messages from companies and would then email the companies for you and request the data deletion for you. And on the same side, the very same service provider would go to companies, say, hey, do you need any help with data deletion? We can assist with that if you pay us money. So yeah, it has become a business, and that has led to a noticeable increase. And now, how did we deal with this? This is a timeline on the left. You see Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Obviously, this represents 4 random days. Not all requests come in on a Monday, but it kind of realistically represents the timeline we have. So Monday, a request might come in, and it would then just read the email, acknowledge the request, go to the nicest services, have a pleasant UI where data deletion isn't really a problem. Next day, you might reach out to other teams that control their own databases and services. And I say, hey guys, can you please delete this, the data related to this user ID? Then a whole day is reserved to deal with nasty services. And there are quite some, you wouldn't believe that. There are services that don't let you search users by email address or by any ID you use internally, but require using their own ID. So just very few services make it very slow sometimes. And on day 4, that is usually the timeline we were looking at. The stuff is done, confirm deletion, all good. On the right, you see like some of the screenshots from my internal documentation. As you imagine, this was quite a lengthy process and not much fun. So Here's a few reasons why the old process wasn't much fun, wasn't great. It's error prone. So you might imagine when dealing with lots of IDs, lots of different numeric IDs, might all look similar. It's easy to mix them up. Even when copying, when working with email addresses, just imagine you leave like a white space at the beginning of a field or at the end of a field. That obviously will no longer match a user record when talking databases. So simple, where humans, lots of human work is involved, there's lots of room for errors. It's also slow for obvious reasons because, well, there is other stuff to do, not just deleting data. And that's also intransparent. Because like imagine I start on Monday, then get sick on Tuesday, like no one knows what has been done with this deletion request, what needs to be done. There is also typically no log at the end of what has happened when something has happened. So it's very intransparent. And now obviously working at N8N, we couldn't keep it like this. So how does the new process look like? Oh, darn, I wanted to switch. That's it. So it has become a simple / command. And now deletion is as simple as issuing this Slack command. And suppose this is very boring to show. So let's do a quick demo. This is the wonderful workflow. It looks a bit convoluted, but part on the left is mostly handling Slack commands and keeping it flexible / commands. So let's see, actually run the workflow. And now let's request data deletion. As I said, this would be the command. And we have little Wally here confirming that he's on it. I really like Wally because he's cleaning up stuff, and that's exactly what the workflow does. Now switching to the workflow, we can see that it has received the / command. The first step then is some basic validation. So Slack does attach a unique token to each request, and that can be used by receiving servers to validate the request, right? So I'm just comparing tokens here. Then I use a set node to format my data a bit, and that is because the information coming from Slack is very comprehensive, right? Lots of data I'm not interested in, I don't really want to work with, it's just confusing me. So I'm using a set node here to simplify it, basically in an operation and in an email, because that's all I need to know here at this stage. And then I use a switch node. And the idea is to keep this workflow easily extendable. So what this workflow does is it reads the operation, and then depending on which operation has been selected, it routes the execution to one of the outputs. So far, it only supports the delete operation, but it can easily be extended, right? So you could easily add a new rule to also process information requests or whatever you have in mind by just connecting it to another output. And all of these paths also have error handling. So if at any stage validation fails, would send an error back just to let the user know, or in this case, like if the token fails, I'm just responding with an empty body. But in all other cases, you would get a nice and talking error, like telling me this email address has not been found, telling user how to actually do this. And now let's assume everything is working, like here. We just acknowledge the request. This is the first Wally message saying that's it. We then call sub workflows, and this is what I really enjoyed working with N8N here. All these sub workflows process the deletion in a single service. So this workflow is easily extendable and also customizable. Imagine I no longer want to, we're no longer using customer.ao data. I can simply remove this node and the workflow would still work as expected, right? There is not much more to it. If you need to integrate a new service, you can also execute another workflow, another sub workflow here, and doing this using the execute workflow node. This is like a powerful node that just runs a sub workflow, keeps it nice and clean. And now after all these sub workflows have executed, I'm just preparing a nice log entry. I'm then hashing the email address. And why do I do this? Obviously, I want to keep a record of what I've done, right? When my manager Max comes to me and says, "Hey, Tom, what have you done last week?" So like nothing really, or I've deleted data, but I'm not allowed to keep logs of it. So to not run into this situation, I actually do keep logs, but without personal information. So what I'm doing here is I'm calculating a hash value based on the email address, and this is the value we'll use thereafter. This also helps in case something does come up. So this wasn't just my work. This is a collaboration, this workflow. Thomasina and John, both from the N8N team, have helped here. They have worked on each of the sub workflows, on getting some of the legal information around this. And one of the problems we really had was, okay, what do we do about our affiliates? So people who would usually get money from us, they might reach out and say like, hey, can you please delete my data? And now what? Does this automatically end the business relationship or not? So these were questions that had to be answered. Turns out, in case you're curious, yes, if you ask a business partner to delete all your personal data, you're no longer a business partner. You can no longer expect to get paid because there is no more data for you on file. Well, in case complaints come in later and say, like, hey, why did I not get paid? I could, again, calculate this hash value and say, like, hey, that's because you have deleted the data deletion a few weeks ago, a few months ago, or whatever. And then the last steps are really simple. I append this data to Airtable, which is where I keep my log in this case, and then respond to Slack. Now, the response looks like this. So you can see, like, has finished, shows me the status with a nice green check mark if it went okay. Actually, it's called white tick, or red cross and a red X if it failed. And it also has like a deep link to the Airtable logs. So we can take a look at how that looks like. So here we have the email hash as the unique identifier, keeps notes of all the data that has been deleted. And this would also be where it would log any problems. So we will take a very brief look in one of the sub workflows in a second. In case any problems would have come up, this result would not have been done, but instead it would have say error, and the notes field would contain details of the errors. You can obviously like customize the logs if you have more in-depth requirements, but I think for now this is a good enough process. Now, set customizable teamwork. This is a single workflow, but there are also lots of these sub workflows, and they are what was really fun about this process. So let's open the Zendesk workflow here. So you can see this is how one of these sub workflows look like that delete data. And you can see this is actually a credit to John here. I've deleted the actual deletion, I've disabled the actual deletion just to make sure I'm not accidentally deleting any data while demoing this. But you can see like this first node again sets the incoming data. It also sets some dummy data in case, which is a really cool feature of N8N. It lets you use JavaScript, so I can run the sub workflow on its own if I wanted to test or debug it without triggering it from the parent workflow. So what I'm doing here is I take over the email field that I get from the parent, but if it doesn't come through, I just set my dummy email address here just so I have something to work with. So this workflow would be able to run. And then it's just like any other workflow, no dark magic here. First checking if this is a delete operation, if not, return an error. Checking if the user exists, if not, return success, because technically not every user might exist in Zendesk, right? So a non-existing user is a success case from the deletion point of view. Like, don't have anything to delete. This was still a success, no error. And afterwards, I delete all my data. I'm not doing that here actually, but in the real world, I obviously would delete data here for real requests. So if you ever reach out, I promise I will delete your data, but not during a demo. And that is basically the idea. So to just reiterate on these key points for collaboration that I've just mentioned, how we split up the work was we used sub workflows for each of the services that we need to delete data from. We agreed on a consistent data structure. So we defined how does incoming data for each sub workflow look like, how is the outgoing data for each sub workflow look like, and keeping it readable. Set this, I have some nodes with the default names, but most of the nodes do have readable names that just describe what they do. So I avoid keeping nodes that are just called HTTP request, or if without anything else. So where to go from here is my final slide, and then you know all about my GDPR deletion approaches here. The thing I was thinking about was implement additional GDPR processes. You've already seen this switch now that I'm using. But funnily enough, I have not seen a single information request coming into N8N, and it would be rather boring if you've ever signed up to any of the services. Like if you use N8N Cloud, we ask for an email address and a nickname, and that's it, right? There is no exciting data to request, I suppose. That's why no one would ask for that. Please don't ask for this now, because it will be lots of work for me. Second thing is build a UI. Like I personally love slash commands, but not everyone else might. So I was thinking maybe a simple form. Teflon Dude has already shown that in a previous community meetup, which is really cool, how to serve simple forms with N8N. So I was thinking about making that possible. And the last thing is connect to manual operations. So not every team you're working with might want you to update their production database. So the idea was you cannot send out Slack messages from N8N or Mattermost messages that attach buttons where people can confirm once they've done something. And this is something I wanted to work on next. And that's how we currently handle GDPR deletion at N8N.
And if I may say, because we were doing GDPR deletions before Tom came on board, it was very painful. It was very manual request. Didn't happen very often, but this has truly revolutionized how we have to handle this kind of requests.
Definitely, I can agree on that. Thank you so much, Tom, for sharing this. It's like the first time I saw this, I was blown away by how much you can do, and I'm sure it is going to inspire a lot of our community members as well. Now, let's move ahead to the next part, which is the Q&A. And I have got a couple of questions from the community members. Again, folks, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the chat. So the first question is for you, Max. It's around the user management feature, and they ask, can you block access to certain information in individual modules or access entirely to a module?
I'm assuming from modules we'll mean nodes here. And so, yes, that is envisioned in functionality generally from a UI aspect, like being able to do it from the UI. That won't be in this very first MVP, but absolutely in our research, it would basically be credentials and nodes we saw as kind of the biggest things that people want control on. So any kind of questions about permissions, I can tell you that for the whole vision and roadmap of this feature, these are the two things, with credentials being the most important one, of course, where you'll probably see the most granularity across different things, because that's where we saw there was a lot, this sort of need and potential pain around if that went wrong, right, in a real world scenario.
Makes sense. And you also talked about, that the user management feature is currently under testing. So if a community member wants to, be involved and help with the testing of this feature, how can they be involved?
So that's a really good question, because right now we don't have some sort of formal alpha program or anything like that. What I would say is I can have a chat with the team, and what we could consider is, we definitely want to do some preliminary testing, because if there's some known issues that we're working out, it's not all that helpful to get that confirmed, right? But if that sounds like it could be helpful, we can have a chat, and most likely we'll post something in the forum if we do on sort of alpha release to test and whatnot. But I'll have a chat with the team. We got a meeting Monday morning, and see the feasibility of all that, because obviously inbound interest to help is much appreciated. So yeah, I'll follow up on that request.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And Tom, this one is for you. How do you stop the abuse of the / command? Do you have some kind of authentication in place?
Yes, this was done through the token that I briefly ran through. So I didn't want to focus on that because that's more Slack topic, but Slack generates a unique token for each application or for each / command that you register. And you can validate this in the workflow to make sure this is an authenticated request coming from Slack and not from someone else who might have seen the endpoint right now in the demo, for example. You would only be able to execute this when running the token. You can perform further validation if needed, right? You could validate the user ID received from Slack after you've validated this is a legit request from Slack. To be completely honest here, like the production workflow, I only enable this when I actually run a deletion. So the workflow is disabled most of the time. As an additional manual safeguard, if you will. But the token would be the main validation point for all / commands, not just for GDPR.
Got it. Thank you. And the other question for you, Tom, is what is the best way to incorporate forms in N8N?
Oh, I think this is something that I'm not the expert on, right? That would be Jason. He said like he will be showing a form a bit later. So but essentially, you could serve HTML right from N8N, right? You could use the webhook and respond to webhook nodes to serve an HTML form, which then sends response data to another webhook. That's how I have done it in the past, but I'm sure like Jason has some more insights on this in a bit.
Sure. Max, this one is for you. Like, do we have an ETA for the new UI? for I think it's around the node input that we showed earlier.
Sure. So there is no sort of release date on that. Since engineering hasn't broken down, I think if I gave one, I might have some upset engineers because they really care about high quality. So there is no ETA, but what I can say is that the design is all locked and tested and the work plan's been done. So I think we're using some of the resources we're going to use on No Details View to just finish up user management. So I'm hoping like next week we're breaking ground on it. So I can't say, but it's not sort of one of these things that's sitting around in a backlog for a long time. It is like ready, and internally we're very excited for it. So there's a lot of appetite to break ground on that and get it out to all of you.
Wonderful. And there's another question is for you as well, Max, and it's on the user management feature. Is there an option to share workflows to be used as a sub workflow without edit permission?
Yeah, so at the moment, there won't be sharing of workflows in the minimum viable product in the V1. So the biggest benefit will be that, again, if you do have multiple people that before all had to share this one account, they can all edit permissions or can edit each other's credentials and whatnot, you will now be able to support those users without having to spin them up all in their own workflow. And so in the next phase, we have already sort of designed out all the permissions and everything there, but I will take this case because that, once this feature's out, we'll then be sort of reassessing that, making sure nothing's changed, any feedback from the community, so we can sort of check these cases because that's a really good point. And I wouldn't want to give a specific answer on that because usually with this permission stuff, gotta look at the notes and kind of run through it to give like a definite answer.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, both of you, for answering all the questions. Let's move forward to the next talk. So Adrian is the co-founder of Opsmit, which is an automation first startup. So let's listen to his journey on building an automation first startup and about the opportunities and challenges that they are facing right now. Adrian, over to you.
Hey guys, nice to see everybody. I'm really excited to have the chance to chat with you guys for a lot of reasons, but mainly because I'm a business person. So the question is like, what the hell is this like MBA doing at this amazing meetup with this like huge room of technical talent? Like, it's almost like that party in college that you walk into and you're like, I'm not supposed to be here, but I like it here. And how do I make more friends? So that's sort of my lead up into this. NAN has been on my radar really since October when I met this gentleman that lives in Edmonton, Canada, that I think that a lot of you other folks know, Mr. Jason McFeetors. And I have to give him like a huge shout out for introducing me to what is happening in business automation beyond Zapier. So let's just set the scene that way. So a little bit about me, like what do I want to be when I grow up? I would say that I'm still very much trying to figure that out. But part of what I do for a living is sales. So let me try to sell to you a little bit about why this person who has this kind of like plain vanilla business background, like reform management consultant, like MBA, but I don't really use that for a living. I work for a corporate strategy team for a big CPG company. And then I think that my life really changed in 2014 when I started working for a tech company in business operations, and then was able to lead a tech startup from seed to exit as COO. So, I learned a lot about how to build, grow, and scale companies. But I think that the number one thing that I learned and what's most relevant for this conversation is how I felt after I sold my last company. And it's not like how it looks in the movies. Like, it's not Wolf of Wall Street where everybody's, drinking Dom and the $100 bills are coming down from the ceiling, right? the way I felt was just completely burned out and like a marathon runner that couldn't go another quarter of a mile beyond the finish line. So I've been spending the last year of my life, it's been about a year since we sold the last company, and really thinking about why I personally felt just so burned out after that experience. And I think that part of it is that I really thought I knew what I was doing, and I was just doing things by the book, right? It's like what I was taught at the consulting firm and what I was taught in business school. And one of the things that you're taught in the book is that internal operations, all you have to do for that is to buy SaaS, you hire smart people and let them figure it out. It's sort of the ethic that Uber has made very popular all around. Let's just get a bunch of smart people. Let's get them working 18 hours a day and let them just kind of figure out how to run the company. And what we're building at OpsMate is really, I think, my answer to a different way of building, scaling internal operations at high growth companies. Because like, let's just face it, the reason why there's so much VC money going into tech is because the margins are outstanding. So, and what VC's hand wave is that as long as your gross margins are good, revenue minus, direct costs of goods sold, as long as that's like a 60, maybe a high 50, we're good. You can have all the cash you want. But what's buried underneath that gross margin line in SG&A is all of the operations people, and whether that's marketing ops or sales ops or finance ops or customer service ops, all of the manual Turks that are operating companies today with very little technology. And I know that that resonates for a lot of people in this room because we are, after all, at like the best automation tool that's out there. And a lot of people using their evening on a Friday to participate in this. So as a business operations person, like this is what I see when I look at a company. That you have product and engineering building customer facing product. This is what the customer sees. And, bespoke, that full stack engineering effort usually goes to building customer facing product. And that's exactly where it should go. Like no company is thinking about how do I differentiate versus competitors based on internal operations. Maybe there's some conversation in customer service. Hey, it should be a revenue channel, get that. But the reality is that there's all of this hidden effort, which just kind of goes on the back of operations people to just operate manually. Like your seven SaaS apps, your 5 spreadsheets, priorities changing. Oh, there's a board meeting next week. Let's drop everything because we need to create all these reports manually. And I think that this is sort of how I would describe what the status quo looks like. And as a founder, you can't go wrong just doing what everybody else is doing. And what everybody else is doing is, let's just build a V1 of ops. Like I think about ops as having MVPs too. That looks like Slack, email, spreadsheets, maybe a little Asana. And then there's a point where the business starts to scale, and just what people do is that they add SaaS, they add hire, they add outsource. But what people don't, I think, intentionally realize by following the status quo is that more unconnected tools adds more complexity. So the whole reason why we love tech is it can scale very fast. But the product can't scale if operations doesn't scale along with it. And my experience has been manual operations often holds back a really amazing product from scaling as quickly and getting into as many users' hands as it can. So like we're at the NAN meetup, like I said, like we're smart people that are comfortable being contrarian. So what if the status quo sucks? I think we all can see that, and I think that many of us have experienced that. Like, what does another option look like? And really, you know, we're building OpsMate to be that other option, and not to say that people shouldn't follow the status quo. That is an option today, but what we're building is another option, where instead of just adding SaaS and adding labor, that once you've evolved beyond kind of the V1 operation stage, that this is exactly the time to begin contemplating automation. And what can that look like? Like, what is the work we're doing? Let's do something fairly shocking and like write it down. Like, nowhere I've ever worked has had workflow diagrams. And you know why? Because I never thought to do it, because nobody else was doing that. And that just seems so pedantic in like a fast moving tech world. Like, hey, everybody, let's not do any work for a week and write down workflow diagrams about the work that we've been doing. But when you look at things through an automation first lens, it just makes sense, because if it's hard to automate things if you can't see those connections. And I think another huge thing that particularly Jason has taught me is all around infrastructure. That like at my first job ever out of college, if I was home doing work, I had to dial into a VPN to hit a on-prem network that was in a little closet in the building that I worked in. And what I'm seeing from clients, particularly clients that work with a lot of PII, is that they don't really understand the risk that they're putting customer information through by just like, say, sharing public links over Slack. So that's, I think, you know, really, I think where I'll end, because I'm at time, which is, I think that everybody in this meeting has the same end goal in mind. Like, how do we initiate this macro change in how work is done? And I think my goal in this talk was just to kind of give the business ops perspective, a very non-technical perspective about how it looks when you're the COO of a company and you have a decision to make about how to build ops. And I'm very, very optimistic that the next generation of founders, the founders that are using, you know, Bubble to build their SaaS and using Notion for knowledge management and using Pipe to securitize some of their MRR so they don't have to sell part of their company for capital, that this amazing new breed of founder is going to be embracing a very new way of building internal ops. That's really, you know, like the title of this presentation, an automation first mindset. So I'll stop there. Thank you all for the opportunity to talk. Yeah, appreciate it. I'll kick it back to you, Herschel.
Thank you so much, Adrian. This was really helpful, and yeah, I see a lot of people in the chat also agreeing with me and agreeing with you. And I have a question. I know you have to jump off to another call, so just one question that I came across in the chat is, how do you explain this to the business and not let them stay in the old habits?
It's an amazing question, and I'll tell you how like we're handling it at OpsMate is that we are talking to companies very, very early in their cycle. Like we're talking right around the time that they're about to raise a seed round, and trying to hit them right at that inflection point where it's like, we know what we have doesn't work. Like we don't even have basic tools, and to provide them with a product that they can use in lieu of buying everything separately and having all these non-connected apps. So I just to summarize, I think that as an industry, we need to think about even earlier in the maturation process to get companies building automation first, so that when they're scaling, you know, past the $100 million of ARR, that there's already that infrastructure and ethic. It's just how we do things.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Adrian, for answering that. I don't want to take more of your time. Thank you again for being in the meetup and sharing your story with us.
Cool. Nice to meet you guys. And if anybody has any follow-ups, hit me up on Twitter at Adrian Albus. Cool. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. So moving forward, it's the time for the last talk of this meetup, and let's just get ready, because whenever Jason is, in the meetup, he always has some really interesting, wonderful stuff to teach us. So not gonna take more of Jason's time. And Jason, the floor is all yours.
Thanks a lot. Every time that I come in here and you introduce me, I feel less and less like I'm actually prepared to meet up the expectations that are coming out. And I also noticed that I think I need to update my photo that you have on the screen there. I look far too young and energetic compared to what I am now. So today, I was given some thought earlier on the last couple of weeks as to what to talk about. And one of the things that I've been starting to experience is we go and we do a lot of this building up of automations to make usually somebody else's life easier. And what ends up happening is that we've got all this stuff in place, and now what we end up doing is we have this other process that we've taken away from them, and it kind of lands with us. So I thought, why don't we do a little bit of a presentation on pushing that back to them? So what I've done is, I'm just going to share my screen here, is I have put together this wonderful little end-to-end workflow. And so the scenario here is we have somebody who has, they've got this shopping list that once a week, somebody goes out and gets picks up all these items in an office. And so the person who's managing this came to me and said, hey, you know what, is there a way that we can just, have an easy way to add this information in so that people can go and put information into the system, and then once a week the list gets emailed to the person that needs to send it out? And we said, sure, no problem. So what we did is we set up in base row a nice little shopping list, and it's just whatever you need. And then from base row, because base row is kind of nice for this, created a nice little form that's just inherent, built right into base row. There's nothing that we haven't even touched any in at this point. And so you can go in here, you can put in, whatever you want. It doesn't care. You hit submit, and it just shows up in your list. So pretty straightforward, nothing really rocket sciencey there. And then we set up a cron node to every week on Friday at 1400 hours. It'll fire it off. It'll pull that list in, format it properly, and then send an email out to the person. And I think we've got this going to tom@example.com, who's receiving this, and they get the list of all the things that they get. So pretty straightforward, but now here's this one less task to do. Fantastic. Well, of course, anything that's good is not good enough. And the boss comes to you and goes, hey, that's great, but you know what? Tom's not going to be in on Friday, so we need to change that email address. So he calls you up and says that, we need that changed, and says, okay, who's going to do it? Oh, wait a second, I'm not really sure. Let me go and find out. Calls you back an hour later, says, oh yeah, it's going to be Bill. Bill's going to do it. Okay, fantastic. What's Bill's email address? Oh, I'll get back to you. So all of this is just taking up your time, wasting your time, quite frankly. So I thought, why don't we just take this to the next level? So we added in this little bit here at the bottom. And essentially what I did is we were talking about forms earlier. I created a little form, and that's just this little piece here. And what it does is it creates and of course I cannot see the rest of my tabs because of the tab bar at the top. Let me move that aside. There we go. Sorry about that. So that form looks like this. And it's a change shopper form. And along with that, we've created a shopper table. So this is the piece where instead of now embedding the configuration inside of N8N, so that if I want to pass that work off to somebody else, I'd have to go in and I would have to give them access to N8N. We've actually got it stored in this database. And when they come into here, so this is the form that we've set up. And again, this all runs from this little workflow right here. And all it does is it gathers the information when the form is submitted. It gets the present shopper, and that allows it to show who the present shopper is here. And then it just, the last node generates the form and it spits it out as HTML. And that produces this for us. So the other piece to that is the second one, where the second webflow, webhook grabs that information when it's posted. It gets the former shopper information and then sets the new shopper information. And the reason it gets this is because it's going to overwrite that record. It then writes that record to the database and it creates the response page, which is just another HTML page. So when I go into here and we say, okay, it's going to be Bill is going to be the person who is going to be doing the shopping this week. And we hit a submit. There we go. So now Bill Fold is going shopping. And we'll notice here now, Bill is the person who is going to be doing the work. So in order to make this work, all we have to do is add one extra thing in here. And right here, we're going to add ourselves an extra node. We're just going to add another base row node. And we'll grab our credentials, and we are going to grab from the office shopping list, the shopper, and we're just going to return the single one. And when we do this, you'll see that it will, well, of course, oh no, we're good. So now it's got Bill's information. Quick change here to an expression. Let's delete this. I'm going to grab the data from the previous node. And now you see it's Bill who's going to be doing the shopping. So now, instead of the manager calling me up and saying, oh, we got to do all this stuff and we got to make all this work, and calling me back 3 times because he doesn't have all his ducks in a row, all we do is just say, hey, all you need to do now is go to this form, you give him that URL, and everything gets done. So I think this has a lot of implications, doing this type of work and setting things up this way, a lot of implications for our sanity as automators and our sanity as people who are managing this infrastructure. It allows the user to have the flexibility to do various different things within certain realms, and it eliminates those little interruptions, because the interruptions are really what kills your day. They say that a single interruption will take you about 20 minutes to get back on track after you've gone and gotten off track. So this here, if he has to call you 3 times, you've just saved yourself an hour of effort. So you can take that extra long lunch break, which is what really counts. And that's it. That's pretty much all I wanted to show you guys today. Again, it's not super rocket science, but I think it's something that can, looking at, I know how hard all of you guys have to work. I think it can make a big difference for you. And I'll just send that back over to Harshal.
Jason, every time you give a talk, it's always a simple solution, but it's mind-blowing and it makes our life so easy.
The bar is set high for next time, eh?
And yes, I'll get you a new picture.
Thank you. Thank you, Jason, for this. As I mentioned, it's always inspiring to see these incredible ideas and learning from you. So I am gonna wait for a couple of minutes to see, if we have more questions coming in. While we are waiting for the questions, Jason, we had a question earlier on forms. So what
Yep.
is, the best way to integrate forms in N10? And you have done a lot of work, and you also did show us a couple of ways how people can integrate forms. Do you want to extend on that?
Sure. So there's a couple of things around that. What I've shown here is I typically like to do most of my work just specifically within N8N when I'm doing my demos. I don't want to complicate things any more than I have to. And then this way, if you have N8N up and running, you've got a full solution right there. You don't need to do anything else. That being said, I am kind of abusing the webhook node a little bit, or maybe a lot. It's kind of complicated to get like graphics in there. It's challenging to write the code because you have to write it as an expression in the expression node or the expression editor. So really what I recommend is you have some other form of a web form generator or tool to do most of that. So most of my work right now in experimentation is using what's referred to as a caddy server. So if you're not familiar with caddy server, it's essentially a nice little all-in-one tool. It's open source that lets you host your websites. It acts as a reverse proxy. It's got an API for automation. So I'm actually working on N8N workflows that completely configure caddy remotely. And that's probably where I'm heading, where I'm going to have web forms built within caddy that will then just point to N8N. It takes the strain off N8N. It isolates it onto a different system if you want even, and it allows you to have a bit more of a robust and a better way of actually doing some of this stuff. And yet you can still pass information from caddy to N8N and vice versa through the APIs and the webhooks. So you've still got that dynamic piece working in behind the scenes. So there's a long answer to a short question.
And if I may add on the topic of generating forms within it, and I think Jason has aptly put it, there are better tools if you're trying to do that a lot, because it can get a little finicky. But a product is a living, breathing thing. So if creating forms is something you do a lot and you would like to be easier in N8N, that's what the community forums are for. Everyone can post a feature request. So we have had conceptual, as you can imagine, we love N8N, so we talk about like probably years worth of roadmaps sometimes in a brainstorming session. But these are things we've discussed, right? For example, in the wait node, you can have it waits until it receives a webhook. Same could be said for a web form. What is the scope of what a simple web form builder in N8N might look like? So it's nothing that's on our official roadmap, but you have the power to put it on our official roadmap with enough upvotes, on the forum. So if this is something that you think would be a game changer for how you use N8N, Harsh will just post the link. Please do submit your feature requests, and we'll sort of go through the process and assessing the community if a lot of other folks want to build it. And if they do, it's more likely to get built.
Wonderful. Thank you, Max, for jumping in, and thank you, Jason, for sharing the answer. I'm gonna try caddy server and see, and I'm definitely gonna ping you and trouble you with that. But yeah, thank you for that. I don't see any more questions coming in, so I thank you for joining in. It was wonderful to have you, and I hope to see you soon in the next meetup.